Good afternoon, and thank you for being a part of Ethanol Producer Magazine's webinar series. Today's webinar is titled The Baier Single-Bolt Manway System, a game changer for the rail tank car industry, sponsored by Selco Products. My name is John Nelson, and I am the moderator of today's webinar, and I'm joined with a panel of outstanding gentlemen. First off, we have Mark Smith, president of Baier Rail. We have Raymond Call, Director of Engineering at Baier Rail, and we have Sandy Smith, Director of Business Development at Baier Rail. And last, we have Dave Klug, VP of Business Development and Customer Support and Marketing at Selco Products. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items that we want to go over. There will be a Q&A at the end, so if you do have questions, please submit them on the right hand of your webinar tab. You can see there's a questions tab, and you can write them in there, and we'll be answering any questions you have at the end. Also, the webinar will be recorded and available on ethanolproducer.com. So if you did miss, if a colleague missed it or you want to watch it again, we definitely will have that available for you. And now, before we jump into the presentation, we're going to have a short video that demonstrates a little bit and tells a little bit more about the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system.
Welcome to the new Manway from Baier Rail. Unlike other tank car Manway designs which use flat gaskets for sealing, Baier Rail's patented design for the new Manway uses an encapsulated O-ring that fits easily into a retaining groove in the shear ring of the cover. The O-ring is comprised of an internal elastomer with an external Teflon jacket. This O-ring design provides superior chemical resistance to commodities and has the durability required for long-term and repeated use. A retractable T-handle pin allows the cover and strongback assembly to move from an unlocked to locked position and vice versa. At the top of the strongback is a hinged cover cap, which keeps weather elements away from a 3-inch single-bolt ram, which is easily rotated using hand tools. Approximately 5.5 turns will move the cover into a fully closed position, engaging the O-ring with the internal surface of the nozzle and creating even clamping pressure across the hatch surface. A protruding feature on the inside of the weather cap corresponds to a female socket on the ram. These features engage when the cap is closed to lock the ram in place and prevent it from backdriving. The O-ring creates a superior seal between the cover shear ring and the inner wall of the nozzle using constant compression. An increase of internal pressure works to the advantage of the O-ring's design as it displaces against the sealing surfaces. Traditional flat gasket sealing systems, on the other hand, lose their compression as increasing internal pressure puts stress on the bolts. To counter this, operators often over-torque the bolts, which can damage them, as well as crush the gasket, making the flat gaskets ineffective and requiring replacement. The new Manway has been designed to safely release internal pressure. As the ram is turned counterclockwise, the strong back bears against the nozzle flange to lift the cover. As the O-ring pulls away from the sealing surface, the pressure in the tank is allowed to vent safely, while the strong back keeps the cover in a down and locked position. Once the T-handle pin is lifted, the strong back can be moved into the unlocked position. However, the cover can only be fully opened after the secondary safety latch is released. Thank you for watching the new Manway from Baier Rail. Purpose-built to be quick, safe, and effective. For more information, please visit our website at www.baierrail.com.
Welcome at last to the presentation on the features and advantages of the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system for railroad tank cars. As they said, our presenters today are myself, Alexander Smith, and Mark Smith, Ray Call, our Director of Engineering, and from Selco Products, Dave Klug. Now, a word from Dave at Selco Products.
Hi, good afternoon. I just wanted to give a real quick overview of Selco and let you know we are the marketing and sales arm for Baier into the railcar market. Quick information about us. We are a 38-year-old company focused on the railcar market. You can see about 180 employees, 2 main locations, headquarters in Lamont, just outside Chicago, and Houston, Texas. And as a company, we design, manufacture, and distribute parts for both tank and hopper rail cars. With over 33,000 SKU items, and of those, 6,000 of those are truly unique, and then variations of them going forward. And in general, it's anything involving loading or unloading of a rail car, the valves, fittings, closures, and so on through. And we work with all levels of the railcar network, OEMs, lessors, the repair network, the shippers, all the way through. And I think very important for us is we are very active beyond just selling parts into the community. We work a lot with the regulatory groups, AAR, FRA, RSI, Chlorine Institute, and so on. We serve on committees, task forces, and it's very important that we do that. It keeps us very in the know of what's going on in the industry. And we have a regulatory compliance group that engages with companies at all levels to ensure their compliance, to help them with their compliance testing and so on. That's very important for any one of the people in the business, any one of the companies. Our partnership with Baier, we're real excited about. We are proud to be their exclusive distributor for this Manway system. And going forward, we are the sales and technical representatives who will handle the inquiries, work with the customers all the way through from start to finish on the product, on the projects that they would have. And you can see there on our list some contact information: phone, website, email. Or if you're already working with Selco, you can just talk to your regular account manager or customer support representative. And with that, I'll just turn it back to Sandy.
Just recapping Selco's role in marketing and distribution, they handle sales, sales engineering, sales and warranty support, and they're backed up by Baier Rail operations and engineering out of Costa Mesa, California. This presentation is intending to be a basic overview of the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system, its advantages to end users. Here's what we'll cover. First, why we came up with this technology. We'll look at the current multi-bolt style Manway, highlighting weaknesses and problems that it creates for users. We'll share a little of the development story with you as to how we came to the present design. We'll expand on the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system's unique features and advantages, especially the O-ring seal and single ram bolt. Then briefly discuss approvals, patents, and service trial results. We'll look at current equipment and commodities where the unit is already in service. Finally, we'll show how this system makes exquisite financial sense for shippers. And then we'll end with questions and answers. This is what the Baier Single-Bolt Manway replaces. The current multi-bolt style Manway has 6 or 8 drop bolts welded into a nozzle, and they clamp a cast or fabricated steel cover with a replaceable flat gasket down onto a tank car nozzle. So that nozzle sits flat on, that gasket sits flat on top of the nozzle. Now this is easily a 150-year-old design. What could possibly go wrong? Well, here's what could go wrong. There's a problem in the tank car industry with multi-bolt style Manways. There are leaks. There are issues for users in the areas of leaks. In the field, a Manway must routinely pass a pressure test, or else the Manway must be resecured, retested, and possibly even sidelined for repair if it fails a test again. Breakage. Bolts break, usually at the wrong time. Warping of the cover can cause leaks. Porosity of the cover can create leaks. Bottom line is, leaks and breakage can be costly all the way around. Leaks and breakage can result in FRA fines, repairs, and logistical disruption and delays. Don't just take our word for it. These stats are from the AAR-BOE, the Bureau of Explosives 2019 report. This is a graph of the infamous NARs, or non-accidental releases. Those 6 factors related to manways in this graph are highlighted in yellow. Loose bolts, gaskets deteriorated, gaskets misaligned, missing, pressure plate loose. All of these manway related factors total 41%. This is just for NARs, or non-accidental releases. Beyond the NARs, there are many other sources of cost, as we shall see. But why is this? In the real world, a loader must stand on top of a tank car, often in inclement weather, and after inspecting and replacing the cover gasket, must normally, with a powerful pneumatic wrench, repetitively tighten and properly torque it, the 6 or 8 bolts in a precise star pattern sequence, which always happens, right? Often a delay will be required to seat the gasket and then retorque. We call this the retorque delay. Even when properly done, this results in uneven force, which you can see shown in red, which can warp and even fracture the manway cover over time. So Baier engineers asked, how can we create uniform sealing force all around the cover? We looked into this situation in depth, and here's what we found. The old multi-style manway tries to achieve a seal by crushing a flat gasket down onto the nozzle surface. It takes a lot of force to create this seal. If a bolt is over torqued, it tends to stretch the bolt, as you can see, and as we saw in the video. And the bolt gets brittle and prone to failure over time. What's more, the crushed gasket will be deformed and soon lose its ability to seal. So flat gaskets typically must be replaced often, sometimes even every trip. These failure costs can be significant. Disruptions and delays may be the most impactful costs for some users. We're talking about normal delays from retorquing and abnormal delays from pressure test failures and actual detectable leaks. Those leaks can result in FRA fines and delays, which are not trivial. Bolts break, usually at the wrong time. When bolts are somewhat costly in and of themselves, the labor to replace them can be something else again. Gaskets can be very costly if they're replaced often. Plus, if they fail, they're much more likely to lead to delays. Worse, a gasket can fold up and fall into the tank, and that's a problem. The bad dream scenario occurs when something like a bolt failure results in a service call by a mobile repair unit, and the total bolt-related cost can skyrocket. One such example cited in Canada was tabbed out at about $3,500 for a single bolt repair in a remote area. Our single bolt manway system has been called a game changer for the rail industry, and with good reason. We've addressed and solved each and every one of those problems. We wish we could tell you this is easy, but here's the story. So if you look at our Baier pedigree, you'll see that we have made marine closures for decades. Solid, quick opening, and so forth. For tank barges, patrol boats, Coast Guard boats, tugboats, and so on. So rail industry people came to us and said, can you make a quick opening hatch for tank cars? So when we claim this unit was purpose built for the tank car industry, this is what we're talking about. We have production, engineering capabilities, and 40 years of experience making industrial components, so we figured we had the dip to do this. No problem. Well, one big problem is the pressure. 207 PSI is the maximum test required, to be exact. On a 20-inch opening, that computes to a lot of force. So we started thinking. For quick action, we settled on a bayonet-style locking closure that provides quick action, positive locking, grips the flange to provide top-to-bottom strength. We used a single ram bolt with modified Acme thread to apply force without back driving. Everything was looking good. Early on, we designed this to squeeze a standard manway gasket with a more or less standard tank car nozzle with a flange on it. we focused on the quick action. The problem was we couldn't get it to seal much past 30 psi. We tried exotic gaskets and all kinds of things, but we didn't have the success we needed. Finally, we were able to get to 207 psi, but the force required was impractical. Along the way, we learned a lot about Manway gaskets, drop bolts, and so on, and really became knowledgeable about how and why the old drop bolt style experiences failure so often. The problem was the internal pressure. And that problem seemed insurmountable until we asked the right question. How can we get the pressure to work for us rather than against us? We solved this problem in the traditional fashion, i.e., 4 guys sitting around a table with beer asking the same question over and over until the eureka moment came forth. I wish I still had the napkin that we drew it up on. The solution was, as you'll see in the next slide, instead of squishing a gasket, we use an O-ring, hold it in a slot on the cover, and have it seal against the machine's surface on the nozzle. As more pressure came from within the tank, the O-ring comes from within the tank, the O-ring will deform slightly upward and outward. More pressure equals more sealing force. A bonus was the cover could even move slightly up and down with no problem, and therefore those insane clamping forces were no longer required to maintain the seal. But what O-ring? We started with the existing O-ring design and material already in use in Tankcar valve assemblies, scaled that up to the size required for the Manway, and with some refinements, this is what we use today. As mentioned, the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system uses a Teflon encapsulated O-ring to seal the Manway cover. Teflon is compatible with a wide range of commodities shipped via Tankcar. The O-ring is far less prone to damage than a flat gasket because it's not pinched. So how does it achieve the seal? The sealing surface is on the side of the cover and nozzle, not on the bottom. No torquing is required to achieve the seal. Of course, some force needs to be applied to the ram bolt to move the cover down into position, but no torque set is involved. This is really important. The O-ring cannot be damaged from over-torquing. It provides a highly reliable seal. Integrity of the O-ring seal is not impacted, even if tightened. Increasing the inside pressure actually improves the sealing force. So pressure is working for us, not against us. And again, this leads to long service life versus a flat gasket. Basically, none of the factors that lead to the old style gasket failure are at work on the Baier O-ring seal. Again, providing long service life. So we achieved it. Our design creates uniform sealing force all the way around the cover, and pressure is working for us and not against us. Hooray for napkins and beer. This entire design approach was unique enough to be awarded 2 patents. Of course, there was a lot of engineering work to be done involving dozens of refinements in the opening and closing action, the cap assembly, the spring tension settings, and safety features to make this a beautifully functioning package, and testing and more testing. The drop bolt design is so old that we virtually had no testing protocols for it. It just was. So working with independent labs, we designed testing protocols for vibration, shaking, side impact, simulated rollover, and so on. Ray, do you have a comment on that?
Not at this time, Sandy.
Okay. Let's focus on the single ram bolt for a second. The single bolt makes it super quick and simple to operate. Allows us to close and go in under 30 seconds with either a hand tool or a power wrench. The ram itself is a 3-inch ram bolt with modified Acme threads. This allows it to apply force to the cover plate. Think about a vise on a workbench. This is how it works. And just like that vise has an Acme thread, it will tend not to backdrive. Additionally, the locking cap assembly provides redundancy and makes loosening essentially impossible, while it protects the ram bolt assembly from the elements. Worth noting, there's no drop bolts to break. It's a metal-to-metal closure, reduces or eliminates all the aforementioned bolt-related out-of-service delays and any NAR infractions. Any comment from Ray or Mark here?
Yeah, I'll make a comment on the cap assembly. It's a multi-purpose part. The part's easily exchangeable if anything ever did happen to it. But it's a weather cap, keeps out all the elements. It keeps the ram locked in place, and it just protects everything.
Another interesting part of that, I think, is that if that ram bolt is not completely depressed, the cap won't fit, it won't close. So you have visual indication that that unit is not totally sealed.
And then also one last comment about the cap assembly is that there is a provision to add a tamper tag to it. So, once you go ahead and have that ram completely seated, the cap in place, the tamper tab, you truly know that nobody has tried to go ahead and reopen the Manway.
Yeah, there's actually there's two places to attach tags or locking cords. I'm tempted, like the TV guys, to say, but wait, there's more, because there is. There are many more inherent advantages to consider. The cover has built-in two-stage venting and auxiliary safety release for enhanced worker safety. In other words, it will open slightly and vent, and you have to manually open a release to lift the cover. For corrosion resistance, all the sealing surfaces are 316 stainless, and you get spring assist, safe controlled pressure relief. And another thing, the O-ring being larger than the nozzle won't accidentally fall in. The variety of off-the-shelf tools can be utilized. Nothing special is needed. The Baier Single-Bolt Manway system has been awarded AAR Design Approval Certification, AAR Factory Certification. We have completed our AAR service trials and have secured the AAR approval under AAR certificate E152106. We have two USA patents, US patents secured on this design, and multiple international patents as well, both for the Manway cover and the O-ring seal inside that Manway cover. Any comment from Mark or Ray on this?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. That AAR review was a pretty rigorous process, and we were awarded a design approval back in 2015. And part of that process was that we had to do multiple bubble leak tests. It was a series of 3 different tests, 15 cycles each. And the reason why they did it in 3 is they allow for a exchange of O-rings or gaskets in the case of flat gasket approvals. But if you can imagine, just to get through the application, we had to do 45 different bubble leak tests in succession and successfully passed all of those. But that was pretty easy for us since we have done the same test on our own hundreds of times.
So looking at where this where this system is employed, it is for general purpose tank cars, and typically you see it on a 117, a DOT 117, but can fit on a DOT 111. Commodities, it's already currently in service on hundreds of cars, hauling our diesel fuel, ethanol, a substantial amount of asphalt and resins. And we have successfully tested it and ready to go with Shell on sulfur and phenol. Ray or Mark, do you have any addition to this?
One of the other commodities that we are currently supplying Manways on is actually on like caustic soda and acids.
Okay, so who can install this? To date, we have seen new car builds installing our Manway by all these new car builders. Trinity, who's done the majority of the installs, Greenbrier, and United Tankcar is currently installing as we speak. In terms of retrofits, Trinity has done quite a few retrofits, and other repair shops have been successful at installing this. I know one of those is Midwest Rail. And again, Mark and Ray, do you have a comment?
No, but to date we have about roughly 600 Manway units installed and working in the rail system.
Some commodities and some operators require a load plate adapter. So Baier has designed a load plate adapter system which will work with both the Baier Manway system and existing multi-bolt Manways. We can tailor that for a specific operator. So you see the fundamental design in the drawing and the picture to the above right, and then an actual tailored unit on the left. And I'd like Ray to kind of opine a little bit on this too.
Sure, yeah, no problem. You know, that picture on the left is the Shell car. In the case of Shell, they were loading phenol. And if anybody knows anything about phenol, it acts a little bit like cotton candy at certain temperatures and wants to stick to metal. And what this load plate adapter did in this case is it protected the sealing surface from any of the commodity attaching to the sealing surface. And that was important because, you know, with an O-ring, you want to make sure that it's going down in a nice, clean surface and it's not riding over, you know, any bumps, if you will, of any type of commodity that might attach itself. The other thing about the load plate is, or the load plate adapter, is that it protects the sealing surface from anything, any tools, any equipment that might damage it. In this picture on the left, you see they have a specific load plate that comes down to do the work, but in a lot of cases, they're just doing splash loading and you've got a boom coming down into the Manway. You know, so we always want to make sure that we've got something that provides some level of protection, regardless of what it is you're trying to put in there.
And the sealing on the nozzle itself is actually pretty forgiving. We've done lots of tests where we've marked it pretty bad with some pretty large detents in there, and still remarkably, we were still able to continue to seal it.
The load plate adapters also required for some commodities, like, as you said, phenol and is it sulfur also?
Yeah, I don't know that it was required for any sulfur, but it certainly would work.
All right, then moving along. To ensure roundness of the Baier BTNZ nozzle during the welding process, Baier has created this nozzle weld fixture. And Ray, you can probably tell us more about this.
Okay. All right, so in new car construction, your tank car is going to have to go through a normalization process. Anytime you've got a lot of heat, whether it be through the normalization or through the initial welding of the nozzle to the tank car, you're introducing high levels of heat, where there's always a possibility of distortion. Same thing happens with the conventional nozzles that you see out there today. It doesn't mean that the nozzle is going to go out of round, but to give a safeguard, if you will, we provide a a weld fixture. Weld fixtures are common in manufacturing for any types of parts that have to go through a heat treating process. The way this works, it's a split ring, and so it just drops down into the nozzle. The outside is brass, so it's not going to mar or damage the sealing surface of the nozzle. And then there's a little center screw there that as you screw it down, it expands the ring out to the exact shape of the nozzle. And then there's a couple of screws on either side of that that tighten everything down. That is used during welding, and then will follow the car all the way through the normalization process. And then once the car is taken out and it's cooled off, then the ring can be removed. And then they can be used repeatedly for further builds and whatnot.
Before we go on to cost benefits, a little fun. We're going to show you a video clip in a second of an actual operator on top of a car and how quickly this unit opens and closes. But just to summarize the unique features that we've gone through: the O-ring instead of a flat gasket, the sealing surface is on the side, the single bolt closure, the fact that there's no torquing, period. It's a metal-to-metal closure. Produces significant benefits in terms of fewer disruptions, delays, fewer leaks, NARs. It dramatically reduces seal replacements. It's faster and easier to open and close, and eliminates gasket, eye bolt, and cover replacements. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tammy, and we're going to see a video.
Okay.
Oh. There you go. If you were counting, that was 26 seconds to close that Manway. And that, did you hear that most of the opening process was actually waiting for it to vent? Compare that to a 6-bolt Manway. So let's look at some potential cost savings. The slides that follow represent hypothetical scenarios. You got to confer with your Salco rep to help them have you build your own tailored cost justification case. But this is a for example, using some industry standard numbers. Just one factor, the time to seal, highlights the difference. As you can see, 1 minute on the Baier versus 3 minutes to close the Manway, the 6-bolt Manway. But that's just the start. Add retorque time for more passes on the multi-bolt. Add in the wild card of retorque delay, which there's none for the Baier. Keep in mind that this can be up to 24 hours in some cases. To ensure the gasket takes a set. And consider the gasket replacement interval, possibly every trip depending on commodity, and you have something that adds up to a significant number. And this is just time to seal. We have determined several other cost factors, or clusters, if you will. Of course, we recognize that customer benefit streams will differ, but we've identified 6 potential clusters of benefits. One company may be changing their Manway gaskets every trip or round trip. Another may be spending a fortune on mobile repair unit callouts. Another may be routinely delaying cars for 24 hours or to retorque Manways, and so on. This is all there for you to discover and tailor your own cost justification analysis. But let's look at one example. So here's a case for you. It's a DOT 117 tank car, which is leased. They're top loading asphalt, taking 1 round trip per month. The gasket typically is replaced on each round trip. And this is used as company supplied data averages for eye-bolt replacement, mobile service call frequency on old style Manways, and average cost per incident. Operational delays and the average, many companies keep an average of cost of NARS per car for the fleet. We did not include parts inventory costs, though they can be significant. It's interesting to me because in that fewer O-rings are needed in the field to cover the odd replacements need. And you only need one part, only one SKU instead of multiple ones. Of course, we assume there will be increased lease costs, so that is in there as the cost, which is a minus number, and the top line, increased capital costs leased. Some of the figures are from industry average statistics. We put in eye-bolt replacement costs, mobile service calls, operational delay costs, and NARS across the fleet for comparison of the conventional 6-bolt with the Baier Single-Bolt. And you see in the right-hand column annual savings of the Baier projected over the conventional 6-bolt. The results for total cost of operation drop out at the bottom of the table. If you think these figures of approximately $200 per month per Manway are high, we have a documented user who is seeing over $250 per car per month savings. So we take these numbers, this is again a case study, an example, but we take those same numbers and plot them out on a chart, and you see that over 10 years, this begins to mount up. It's a very powerful visual. In this case, we have a savings of over $20,000 per car over a 10-year time frame. It may come out for you as definitive as this, or yours may be less dramatic, but in most cases, we think it will be strong. And don't forget your possible hard to quantify intangibles, your reputation, on-time stats, worker fatigue, sales features, and so on. You'll also notice this is a lease example. So note that in a lease cost analysis, there's no payback since the benefit streams begin immediately and exceed the costs. Same numbers shown here that the graph is plotted from. You see the one car and the annual operating costs of $24.54 per year for the 6-bolt versus $374 for the Baier Single-Bolt. Note that a 100-car unit train scenario is computed here in the bottom rows. And this should catch the attention of executives with a broader span of control. Here we put highlight boxes around 1, 5, and 10 years. Some companies use 7 years as a common point of reference. Car owners should also, the owners should take note that because the Baier Single-Bolt is designed for the life of the car, there should be no significant additional capital outlay at year 10. Again, confer with your Salco rep so they can help you build your own tailored cost justification case. In summary, this presentation has shown the Baier Single-Bolt Manway system was purpose-built from the ground up to solve a tank car industry set of problems with the old Manway design, and that has far outlived its utility. The Baier BTSB, as we call it, Baier Trend, is an elegant solution that is faster and easier to operate. It should produce an ongoing stream of benefits to the end user of the product. We believe this technology can significantly reduce your total cost of operation for many tank car fleets. Thanks for your attention. We stand ready to assist you as you look into adapting this exciting new technology into your organization. We offer sales engineering assistance, buying plans, flexible delivery, assistance coordinating among builders, owner lessors, shippers, leasers, repair facilities, and so on. Whatever it takes to get this technology working for you. Now we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Great presentation. We do have some questions that came up here, and we want to go make sure we cover some of those. There's some good questions. I'm going to kind of open this up to the group, so I'll let you guys kind of decide who's best to answer this. But this first question came in. They're asking, the attendee is asking, if an operator tightens bolts properly in a star pattern, is it possible that bolts can vibrate loose in transit?
And that question is regarding the old style 6 or 8 bolt Manways. Can they
Correct.
vibrate loose?
I'll go ahead and take a stab at that one. You know, in principle, any threaded bolt is gonna has the potential to come loose, particularly when you're in an environment with a lot of movement and vibration. In my past, I have done designs on what they call interference thread, which is a design for bolts and threads that would keep that from happening. However, that's not the case here with multi-bolt systems, nor is it the case with our single bolt system. There is always going to be the possibility with movement and time, particularly if you have applied any kind of lubricant to the threads to keep them from rusting or anything like that. There's always going to be that potential. How long that would take, that's hard to say. But I do know that on the multi-bolt systems, they go through a process of maintenance and, you know, a kind of a rigorous kind of, like you said, the star pattern, making sure that they're equally loaded and they're torqued down to a specific torque value per bolt. So, but yes, bolts do loosen up over time.
Great. Another question from Wayne as well from MGP Ingredients. Says, this is an awesome system. Does the old style need cutoff and new single bolt Manway system welded on?
Ray?
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about a retrofit application. Yeah, we provide both new construction nozzles for the .111s and .117s, as well as retrofit nozzles for you know, for this particular situation that I'm hearing. On our retrofit nozzle, it's the shortest nozzle, and what you start with is you have to cut off the existing nozzle, and it's stubbed out to a specific height. And then our nozzles then applied to that. We have, that nozzle comes with an inside beveled edge for welding. And then we also have documentation for the people that have to do that work. So we've got the recommended bevel for the stubbed out nozzle, as well as a pre-beveled edge for our nozzle. And then we've got instructions on how to do the welding and so on and so forth.
Great. We have a question here from Chris from Greenfield. He asks, looks like a great design. Is the AAR going to phase out and ban the old swing bolt style Manway lids?
We sure hope they do.
This is Sandy. I don't know of any plan to do that. Dave, you may have a comment on it, but we would sure like that. We think this is such a superior design that would make a lot of sense, but that's a vendor talking.
This is Dave. I mean, there isn't a plan right now. No. There are 100,000 plus of these hinged and bolted Manway styles out there. So that would be a long phase out program, even if they considered it. This is just, this new product is just an opportunity to go with something that is better and will reduce or eliminate those NARs up around the Manway. But as far as a direct plan, no.
Okay, great. Now, you answered this next question online, but I'm going to ask it just for everyone who doesn't have access to it or people listening in for future. But the question came in from Colin, and so you can, I do see the answer here, but if you guys can elaborate a little bit more. Normal O-ring sealing takes a very tight tolerance between the O-ring groove and the inner surface of the Manway port. The larger the diameter, the greater the difficulty of achieving the tolerance in 360 degrees. There must be specific precautions in constructing the Manway. The flat gasket system doesn't require all but the flat surface of the port must be flat. Is this correct?
That's a great question. Here's what we've done. In manufacturing, the CNC work that's done on both the nozzle and the cover sealing surfaces is done to a very tight tolerance. But it's a tolerance that is reproducible in production. So our manufacturers have no problem achieving that. Then once you get out into installing the nozzle onto the Tankcar, I think I had talked a little bit earlier about the possibility of a nozzle going out of round, right? And so what we have is we have tolerances that allow for that process. There's a certain amount of out of roundness that the system will tolerate, and those are all achievable numbers where it doesn't require anything special to happen. Our O-rings, the compression on the O-ring, by design, the nominal compression on the O-ring is, I believe it's 18%, but you can compress it at 23%, even down to 13%, and still have an effective seal. So the system's robust, and it's repeatable in manufacturing, as well as has good tolerance in field situations.
And it turns out it's very forgiving as well.
Yeah.
I want to point out that we also have a tremendous amount of in-depth support here, both from sales engineering from Salco and the production engineering coming out of Baier Rail. So we're there to assist the installers, whether the new car or repair shops, with quite a bit of depth, not just documents, but people and, if necessary, on-site assistance. Okay, so keep the questions coming, and when it gets down to it, we will be there to help you work through these any issues that you see.
Great. Yeah, and we do have some more questions coming in here, so which is good to have. They're very interested in what's going on here. So We have another question from Wayne. Is it necessary to retorque? This is the first I've heard of something like this. Our FRA inspector has not mentioned that I know of.
The quick answer is no, it is not necessary to retorque. It's really just shutting the door, if you will, here. We have also shown this at the FRA hazmat conferences, and the FRA people are very positively inclined toward this. Very excited about it, actually. So no, there's no retorquing. In fact, we guard and warn against trying to over torque it, because the mindset is, you know, tighter is better. It's not. Closed is closed.
Yeah, you know, it is very different, and sometimes it's hard to get people that have worked with a product for many, many years to think differently when they see a different system. When we think of torque as just the amount of effort it takes to turn the ram bolt. In a multi-bolt system, torque is thought of as final torque, where you want to get it down to a certain tightness, like in like a 6-bolt system, you know, when they say, well, you want a final torque of 250 to 300 foot-pounds. That's a final torque. But when we say, well, it only takes maybe 100 foot-pounds of torque to turn the ram, that's very different. In fact, you know, the final resting place for the ram really doesn't have a whole lot of torque on it at all. That's why we put up a big banner there that says, don't exceed 200 foot-pounds of torque, because it's impractical to do that, to go beyond that, and it really doesn't do any good, because the system achieves seal so differently.
I think adding on to that too, when you're looking at the 6 and 8 bolts, the final torque is really dependent on your gasket material. The elastomerics are less, but if you're going to a hard gasket, it increases. So there's more thought that goes into it versus what you have to do with the Baier system. It's very much putting it down until you get to that metal to metal and stop, and don't over torque it, because it won't add. It'll actually detract from what the strength is of the system.
Great. Yeah, and we have another question here from Stephen from Sire Ethanol, you know, talking about the 6-bolt, kind of along the same lines. What kind of vacuum relief is possible with this Manway? With the 6-bolt, you would be allowed to tighten a bolt after all are loosened to crack the Manway. So what kind of vacuum relief is possible?
Okay, so I'll just make a comment on that. When you're opening up the Manway, you noticed that there were actually 2 levels of protection when it comes to venting. The first is that the strong back claws are underneath the flange, so that the cover's not going to go anywhere just because of that. And then the other one was a secondary safety catch on the side. But as you open up the Manway, the O-ring goes from its sealing system up into a ramped area. Once it hits the ramped area, then the system begins to vent. And just as you saw in the video of the operator up on top, that Manway is able to continue to vent till it's extinguished, and then you can turn the strong back to its open position, open up the safety catch, and open up the cover. I don't know if that was the answer to the question or not.
I want to just add there, you've got as you saw in the video, that was relief of internal pressure. That was pressure relief, and that's just a matter of allowing the Manway to prop open and have the pressure escape. In the case of a vacuum, I think, and I'm not a technical guy, but I think it's a little different in the sense that as you open that cover, the ram bolt pushes the cover up and jacks it up away from the flange. So it is possible that you could have some vacuum venting there. If there's serious vacuum, I imagine you need a vacuum relief valve for that. And again, we're wandering the sales engineering, and that's outside of my expertise. But
That would be correct. That, yeah, if there is a vacuum in the car, no Manway cover, whether it's a 6 or 8 bolt or the Baier, is really set up to relieve the vacuum pressure on there. That should come from a vacuum relief valve. This would be keeping pressure in these Manway covers.
Great. We have a question here from Colin. Then we have a few questions from Dennis Baier, which we will get to. Dennis, we do see those questions, so we appreciate you sending them in. This is from Colin again, talking about the O-ring seals. So he's asking, O-ring seals require that the O-ring is not twisted during installation in the groove. Do you have this twist problem in the sealing with these large O-rings?
No, there's no twist problem at all. The seal O-ring installs real simple, and it snaps right into place.
Yeah, it doesn't roll into place. It just snaps in. That's a good question, but no, the answer is no. There's no problem.
Yeah, and the other thing about this O-ring is because it's a Teflon encapsulated O-ring, Teflon has the lowest coefficient of friction that you can get out there, and so it slides very easily and doesn't want to grab and hold and twist.
I have a series of questions here from Dennis Baier. The first one is, what is the weight of the new hatch? If the spring breaks, how much weight does the operator need to lift?
Good question. I'm just going off of my memory on what we have for that assembly. Do you remember that, Mark, on what the cover assembly weight is?
I think the cover weight itself is maybe 200 pounds. I'm thinking.
I think it's like 90, isn't it, for the cover?
Well, the cover itself, but I think it's close to what Mark said.
Cover and the strong back assembly.
We can come back to that. I'll look it up here real quick.
Yeah, and if you don't have the answer right now while we're live, we can always follow up for sure with everyone. So the second question is, and you talked about this a little bit. Focus of new lid is to prevent leaks. Is there a PRV valve to release excess pressure?
Not on the Manway. That would be on the car.
Yeah, that would be separate from the Manway cover itself. But yes, there, especially if we're talking in ethanol, absolutely, there's a pressure relief valve required.
Okay. The third question is, when opening the hatch, the pressure needs to be released before the lid is opened. The chemical is released 360 degrees at the ankle level of the operator. Is there a skirt that can be added to vent chemicals away from the operator?
Actually, when the Manway is opened, it tends to crack the seal towards the spring, which is 180 degrees away from the operator, and that's where it begins to vent first, and then it'll go ahead and open into the front as well.
One last comment from Dennis. And Dennis, it was good seeing you at the FEW, as always. But he said, comment to the panel, was a pleasure seeing the operation of the new hatch in person at the FEW last week. So we had our International Fuel Ethanol Workshop in Des Moines last week, and we saw some of this in action. So thank you all for being there. We have another question here from Wayne Brook. What is the typical cost of a retrofit per car? It's a very specific question and a good one.
Take it away, Dave. That's for you.
That's for me specifically. I guess that's going to vary, and it's going to depend on what you're considering the costs. Obviously, to do this, for a retrofit, you're cutting off the existing nozzle and applying the Baier system. So you have cleaning involved, you have the weld cost, the product, the actual Baier Manway system cost. So it's going to be a variant with cleaning, but somewhere around $4,000. That's a rough estimate. It's going to depend on what all goes into that part of it. But that's a general, and that's where when Sandy's talking about the long-term savings, that's what's so important. There's an upfront cost, obviously, but a lot of benefit in the long run.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of specifics that go into that, and every situation is a little different. So,
correct. I guess
let's see here.
That'd really be kind of something if you're considering it. You know, looking at the volume of cars you're doing and everything like that. We're certainly happy to work with you and whatever facility is going to be doing the work, and that will give you a more direct quote and direct cost.
Sure.
One thing to consider as well.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One thing to consider as well is that when you install this Baier rail Manway on your car, it is designed to last the complete life of the car itself. You don't have to replace covers, and there's really very few parts that would need to be replaced anyway versus a 6-bolt cover. So once it's on there, it's going to sit there and do its work for the life of the car.
Right. That's a great point. Okay, we do have another question here that came in from Steven. During the video presentation, the operator was finessing the impact. Curious if this was to vent slowly, or was there another reason? For example, loosening the bolt too far?
You need to come back about a quarter of a turn when it's all the way up in order to swing the strong back aside. That's what she was doing.
Okay. Okay. So she was bringing it back. Okay. A quarter turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll make just to add on to what Sandy said. When you're say opening it up, there is a feature underneath the strong back, like the little wedge features. They come in contact with the nozzle flange, and so all she was doing was releasing those two parts from each other, so there wouldn't be any friction where they're trying to drag on each other anymore. All right.
Great. Well, that kind of wraps up our Q&A. If you do have more questions or want to reach out to our panel, please do so. We can definitely get you in touch, or you're able to contact them directly, and we encourage you to do so. Again, today's webinar was sponsored by Selco Products. Again, we appreciate Selco being working with us and bringing this information to everyone on the call. We do have some upcoming events. We have another webinar titled Ethanol Producer Magazine's 2022 Editorial Outlook, where we go over the themes for next year. We also have another one titled Improving Performance and Efficiency with Analytics for Ethanol Facilities. And then a couple big events coming up. We have the International Biomass Conference and Expo taking place in Jacksonville in March. And as we talked a little bit about the FEW, we just had it last week in Des Moines, Iowa. And next year we are scheduled to be in June in Minneapolis for our big ethanol conference. And we hope everyone on the call can join us for that and make plans to be there. So, again, gentlemen, we appreciate you being on today's call and sharing your information with us. And we look forward to future webinars. And again, appreciate everyone taking the time to listen in. So with that, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.